The idea that because I worship Satan, I must be a son of a bitch is a Christian idea. It's like saying that the youth has turned to shit because they listen to rock and roll. Youth turns to shit for 1,000 other reasons, but not because of rock and roll. Youth turned to shit. In September 1982, a series of brief, strange, and almost restrained murders took place in the city of Buenos Aires. Over the course of 1 week, in an area spanning no more than a few blocks in the neighborhood of Mataderos, the lifeless bodies of 4 taxi drivers were found. Each corpse appeared in the early hours of the morning, slumped forward in the front seat of a taxi, with a .22 caliber bullet hole in the right temple. The taxis were parked on dark corners, with their interior lights and engines switched off and their headlights ablaze. There was no sign of robbery, although registration documents for the vehicles and ID for the victims were missing. Except for the last incident, the taxi meters all read 0. Only 3 of the 4 murders made the news. On September 24th, the La Razón, Crónica, La Prensa, and Clarín newspapers devoted only a few lines to the discovery of the body of A.R. on the corner of Pola and Basualdo streets. 4 days later, slightly more space was dedicated to the discovery of C.C. on the 1800 block of Oliden Street. The individual in question was not yet dead, but he was dying. He had a hole in his skull that was bleeding profusely, and in the end, he died on the way to the hospital. Following this second incident, the 42nd Precinct organized a sweeping operation, swarming Mataderos with their own officers as well as reinforcements from the robbery and assault, crime prevention, and investigations units. Despite all this activity, on September 28th, the body of J.G. was found on the corner of Basualdo and Tepalque streets, only 400 meters from the other bodies. Later, 2 more attempted holdups of taxis would take place in the same area, in which the drivers received wounds from blunt objects, but emerged relatively unscathed. One of the drivers gave a description of his attacker, which was drawn up into an identikit and disseminated through the newspapers and television. Police were unable to shed light on the crimes. The only facts ascertained by the agents were that all of the crimes were the work of a single individual and that the perpetrator had not moved from the rear seat of the taxi during the attacks. The gaps in the investigation were filled in by the Buenos Aires media with hypotheses of varying degrees of craziness. We cannot rule out the possibility that this psychopath is a woman in disguise with very short hair. The murderer might be a student attending night school who is mentally unstable and attacks taxi drivers after class. This maniac called the 42nd Precinct and vowed to attack again, saying that nobody could stop him. The murderer is a psychopath with a complex personality. It is thought that he kills only on the corners of streets whose names have an even number of letters in them. Taxi drivers began attacking passengers they thought resembled the identikit. In several sweeps, the police detained over 20 persons of interest, none of whom turned out to have anything to do with the crimes. On the morning of October 15th, 1982, a man presented himself at the Palace of Tribunals in the federal capital and asked to speak with the judge presiding over the case. He said he was coming to clear his name. The taxi murderer was his brother, who at that very moment was with their father having breakfast in an apartment in Caballito. He offered to take the police there. He assured the judge that his brother was unarmed and that they would be able to arrest him without incident. The mysterious murderer turned out to be 20 years old, and he looked completely different from the identikit. His name was Ricardo Luis Melogno. During the judicial interrogation, the young man admitted